Welcome to the Dave Palma Show, the podcast that revives, restores, and awakens your innermost capabilities.
You have the training and the talent to succeed, but do you have the guts to fail?
I love what I do. When you love what you do, you want to be the best at it.
Today is about the power of you. You will change the world.
Find your path to success through the journey of those who have succeeded. And now, your host, Dave Palma.
Hi, welcome back to the Dave Palma Show. And with me today, I have a very special guest in this very special edition of the Dave Palma Show. And she's an award-winning filmmaker who has a debut feature film about to be released called One Person, One Vote. Maximina Juson, welcome to the Dave Palma Show.
Thank you, Dave. So excited to be here.
Very excited to have you here. Just to let you know, I mean, of course, my main profession was firefighter. I did some trade union work and got very heavily political with it. And even with the black firefighters and stuff like that. And then I went on to do a politics degree, which the trade union helped with. And American politics was part of my module.
Okay.
So I did know about the electoral system, and it was quite interesting what happened in 2020 and how that actually made the difference actually. And obviously Trump was going on about, well, I would have won if it was done the English way, the UK system way. He probably would have won because we don't do the electoral roll, but we've got constituents, so we can debate that as well and compare us, do a comparative analysis on that, so to speak. Awesome. But when I was doing my politics degree, I was actually, trying to sort of bring some books that would say, like, if they gave me the French Revolution to do an essay, I bought in the Black Jacobins and read that book as well, and things like that, So I really want to get to the heat of what colonialism really did, So, however, your film is kind of like about that, but it's focused really on the 2020 thing, but how it's linked to slavery. I think that's what I get. Is that right?
That's right. So it basically tells the untold story of the Electoral College, starting from its 1787 creation at the Constitutional Convention, all the way up until January 6, 2021, which was the last step of the Electoral College process.
Oh, okay.
Which it was a process most Americans was not familiar with because it was just more of a formality. But with everything that happened in 2016 and 2020, the Electoral College and all of its steps were front and center in the national conversation like never before. I just happened to be making a documentary at that same time.
Oh, wow. Okay. What prompted you to make that documentary? Is it because of the 2020 elections? I mean, we all know what happened with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything, and that was global, to be honest. And I was in the Philippines at the time. That was amazing because, obviously things were going on in the UK, really, similar, but on a smaller scale. You could say it's like a state, isn't it, with what happened? But
I started working on the film in 2018. I found that across the board, a general pain point among the American electorate was we don't really understand the Electoral College or the process by which our president is elected. Yeah. And no matter what level of education you happen to have, that this was really something that confuses most of us. And so I figured I would I would make a film about it because, when you address something that's a big problem across a large swath of people, then most likely, it's going to be something that a large swath of people will find useful.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to really get my teeth into the documentary. I don't want to obviously give too much away because with this podcast lasting 30 minutes and the film 1 hour and a half, I'll be giving away half the film as it is, so we could give out bits to it, but we really want to help people understand before we talk about the documentary itself and the actors in it and everything, because is it a documentary or is it a film? I looked at
it's a documentary.
It is a documentary because I thought I saw actors in it, but
There are actors.
Right.
We do, they're not reenactments, but we do go back to 1787 when the Electoral College was being devised at the 1787 Constitutional Convention.
Mm-hmm.
The United States is around 10 years old at the time, and they didn't have a centralized set of laws to govern a very young nation. And so the delegates got together to decide on a bunch of laws to write the Constitution, really. of the United States. And one of the things that they needed to address was how they were going to elect, how the U.S. would elect its highest official. They agreed on the name president. And there were a lot of things that were being considered in thinking about how this process would work. And one of which was a very large ratio of enslaved people. At the time, there were 3 million people in the United States across 13 states, 700,000 of which were enslaved. And those enslaved people were clustered and concentrated in the slaveholding states, like Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Maryland. And, those states, were really concerned, like, number one, that the states where slavery was being abolished or phased out would want to take slavery away from them too. But also because since most of their great deal of their population was enslaved and couldn't actually vote, that they would have a minimized influence in both legislation and electing a potential president if it were a direct vote of, because their enslaved people would not be permitted to vote.
Yeah. How long did that go on for, actually? Because obviously, it's a bit like the separate but equal apartheid system, isn't it? Really, that for me, I was born in the mid 1960s, was 1964. So for me, I was hearing about Martin Luther King. Actually, the day Martin Luther King came to London was the day I was born, actually, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
But then obviously he was assassinated, but it was just as huge, his legacy here as it is, and nearly as big as, obviously in America it's bigger. But so for me, there was still a kind of suffrage going on, wasn't there? Voting suffrage going on then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was obviously decades of Jim Crow laws that people like Martin Luther King and, in the 60s with Rosa Parks and, the bus boycott.
Bus boycott,
Yeah, there was a lot going on around that time. I mean, the civil rights movement of America was born. And so, there's a lot going on at that time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Prior to that, there was, millions of Black votes that were being suppressed in different ways, with Black voter suppression, both violent and other ways.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, now, I mean, there's this bit of a thing going on in New York at the moment. We don't want to talk about that because it will distort the whole thing. But this in South Africa is the same. There's some corruption going on, but at the moment, I mean, when I looked at the Black Lives Matter movement, and especially where it started in America, I mean, I'm not talking about George Floyd starting there, but it dug up some history, didn't it? Really, it said, to me, it was saying this civil rights movement, we're not done yet with it. And then other countries all over the world, even Brazil, were saying the same things. Aborigines were saying the same things in, Australia. Various different things were coming up, saying, look, there's still some things that is,
still being addressed. I think, one of the scholars in my film talks about a country that doesn't know its history is like a person walking around with amnesia. And Americans are not the best on history. A lot of it isn't taught in schools. I'm not saying it's their fault, but
no.
That's why I needed to make a film about the Electoral College, because it was a history that had, is not being taught by and large and has been forgotten. And, one of the things that we talk about in the film is you're not really going to understand the Electoral College until you understand its history, how it was created. That's why, we have quotes of the framers from the Constitutional Convention, which the actors are bringing back to life, because I think it's really important for people to hear the very words that the framers were using, or as they were discussing the way we would elect America's president. And a lot of the reason why Americans don't understand the Electoral College and why we have this indirect method of voting is because they don't really, it hasn't been placed in context of its history. And so when you do that, you start to understand, okay, this is what the thinking was. These were the variables that were at play. And they wanted to create an indirect method of voting so that they could count Black people for purposes of representation in Congress and ultimately in votes in the Electoral College without actually giving them any rights as citizens or the ability to vote. And so, when we see everything that's going on today, and we're unable to really tie it back to the history of slavery in this country and draw that line from then to now. You're seeing this, this tension, obviously, and when it comes to racial inequality in this country. And so I think when it comes to the Electoral College and when people learn why it was created and they see, they're able to understand this history, suddenly it starts to make a little bit more sense. And we can start to have a conversation about it, a national reckoning. It may have happened so long ago, but there is a line that you can draw from then to now, which I think it's really important for us to do. Because, until you do that, you can't really have a thoughtful discussion around this entity when you don't have the full information.
No, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. So you mentioned obviously about the Constitution first starting, and I did dig out a few things from the internet, a few videos. So what got to me was how some pro-slavery clauses was omitted, or not the word slavery really written.
Yeah.
And also, just to put people right, what is the Electoral College in a snapshot? Because while we're talking about it and saying people don't know what it is, perhaps you could explain that more.
Right.
When did that actually get written in the Constitution, as well as these clauses that really was a bit loosely worded and created problems as well?
Yeah, well, that's actually a great question. The Electoral College was devised in the summer of 1787, when delegates from all 13 states at the time congregated at an Independence Hall in Philadelphia to decide what a centralized set of laws that would govern across all 13 states. At the time, there were 13 states. They all had their half-baked armies, their own currency, their own set of leaders, but there wasn't a centralized government that governed, this new entity called the United States.
Yeah.
And so they, got together to come up with the U.S. Constitution. And there were 3 pro-slavery clauses: the 3/5 compromise, the 3/5 clause, which relates to the Electoral College, which you learn about in the film, the African slave trade clause, and the African fugitive slave clause. And so, but they were very strategic in never using the word slave or slavery, because the delegates in states where slavery was being abolished or phased out would never want to ratify a constitution that had 3 pro-slavery clauses. So they kind of talked around it, even though they were talking about it. So, for example, the 3/5 compromise, or the 3/5 clause, said that in order to determine or calculate the number of Congress people a state would get, that you would count the whole number of free people, Indians not taxed, and 3/5 of all the others. And that's literally, they use the word the others, and the others were meant to refer directly to enslaved people.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of how a clause written into the Constitution that's specifically about slavery without using the word slave or slavery. And it's really quite stunning, when you learn that, and when you read the Constitution and you see that those clauses are there. they're still there. It's not like they, whited it out or anything like that. Those clauses are still part of the Constitution, but because of the amendments and because we don't have slavery anymore, they obviously can't, take effect directly in terms of how they were written in the Constitution. But I think that, is the kind of beginning, right, of this masking around the Electoral College and the truth behind it. Because when you read the Constitution, you don't see the word slave. So it's very easy to gloss over it.
Yeah. I mean, now fast forward into 2020, because that was something that was mentioned as part of your documentary. And that was a very big situation they mentioned about the Electoral College. Of course, it now had global interest, for all kinds of reasons. 2020 was a very, very, probably one of the most historical year ever going to be because of the pandemic and everything else that was going on, not just only in the US, there's other stuff that's going on around anyway. But in particular, what finished off the year was the American elections and the fact that it ended up with Donald Trump whinging on about, the electoral college, if it wasn't for that, he would have won because of this and that or whatever. I don't know. The pro-Trump kind of media was kind of bleating on about that. Could you explain what was going on there? I mean, just to clarify.
With Donald Trump, I mean, I can't necessarily keep up with all of that.
No.
But as it relates to the 2020 election, we did see the Electoral College and, create all these opportunities to manipulate, with the election, the presidential election. And so we talk about that. We kind of go over that in the film.
Yeah.
How it created, all these opportunities to try and change the outcome of the election, starting with putting Kanye West, on the ballot in states that might be considered swing states.
Yeah.
To try to siphon votes away from, one of the candidates.
Yeah.
To fake electors, basically saying, hey, we want to file alternative votes for another party, to, getting Congress people to object to the votes of electoral votes of other states, to trying to convince the vice president to reject, the electoral votes, and then providing a venue for, January 6th, where, thousands of people congregated, many of which were peaceful protesters, but some of which were extreme, that wanted to, breach the Capitol, stop the vote, which was the last step of the Electoral College process. And so I didn't know that any of that was going to happen when I started making the film.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a testament to the fact that this institution that's so confusing to most American is kind of, reaching this apex in terms of the role that it's playing in our presidential elections. When you can have two candidates that have, a 7 million vote differential just in terms of, how many people voted for one or the other. But then you can find 15,000 votes in one state, 11,000 votes in one state, and another few thousand votes in another state. Just 44,000 votes in three swing states could have changed the outcome of the Electoral College. And so, and you see it playing out now. There's a really strong emphasis on visiting swing states from the candidates. You see it playing it out now. I mean, all of the states that they're visiting are the quote unquote battleground states, or the swing states, where, just a handful of votes can change the outcome of an entire election, even though it's nowhere close to being close.
Yeah.
When considering the national popular vote. So I think, that's something that we should take a look at and discuss, in this country, because it's definitely building to an apex, and we definitely saw that in 2020.
Yeah. The other thing is that I wanted to really say was when I was studying the politics module of my politics degree in University of London, one of the things that the lecturer kept saying was, oh, you ask any Americans if they want to change the Constitution, and you bet the reaction 99% will be no, don't touch it at all, blah, blah, and so it's this aged kind of vintage Constitution that probably in certain regards is in need of changing in some areas, isn't it, really? I mean, you have the Bill of Rights, of course, and amendments, that's what I meant. And those amendments can go on forever, and there's debates around the amendments as well. I mean, you take, I don't know which amendments we could be looking at, I don't know, but there's various anyway. But at that time, there was Americans coming over for their semester to University of London from an American college. I can't remember which one it was. So I thought, now's the chance for me to go and do some research and ask them the question. And they said, no, don't change it. I think one sort of gave a little kind of debate over it, but the majority, you heard a big roar of no's, What I'm getting at there is with these clauses, the pro-slavery clauses, how are we going to change that if you feel that needs to be changed?
I mean, it's written into the Constitution, and you have amendments that basically override that original language. So, I mean, it has been changed.
Yeah.
Most of the amendments that we've seen after the Bill of Rights have to do with expanding voting access to, like, the women's right to vote, And so, those are not, obviously, we don't. The Fugitive Slave Clause, for example, deals with runaway slaves who have escaped to other states where slavery was abolished. And so what the Fugitive Slave Clause says that you, by law, now by constitutional federal law, you were now legally required to return that fugitive slave to their owner, whereas that wasn't the case before.
Oh, right. Okay.
But now you technically don't have runaway slaves, so that's not going to be in effect. The African slave trade clause, we're not, doing that anymore. So it's just not. It's not anything that is alive and well in the United States, except for the Electoral College, which wasn't created as a direct clause of slavery, but that indirect method of voting made it possible to count enslaved people for purposes of representation of votes in the Electoral College. And that indirect method of voting is something that today we still have.
Yes, yeah.
And so, but people don't really know or understand the history. And I think once you do, it starts to make a little bit more sense as to why an indirect method of voting was so important.
And watching One Person, One Vote will obviously untie that and unpack that history and get people to understand it more.
It definitely unpacks the history.
Yeah.
And it's a history, and, not just the history, but just the machinations around, relating to the Electoral College. People don't understand the math, all of that. So this film, One Person, One Vote, is kind of like an all-in, Electoral College. I wouldn't say 101 because it's more than just basic. You really into the entire history.
Well, it's a documentary, isn't it? So it'll be kind of deeper, more deeper dived into it, wouldn't it?
Yes. And so, I mean, the folks at all the screenings have been extremely impacted by the film, feel like they can now talk about the Electoral College in ways that they couldn't before because they didn't have this information.
Yeah.
And, we're also working with PBS and PBS Learning Media. There'll be lesson plans for high school students, grades 9 to 12.
Okay,
on PBS Learning Media. And, I'm also doing screenings at universities and college around the country, and also doing talks and Q&As. But the ones that we've had, with students have been really impactful because for them to go into being able to vote and in our democracy with the knowledge and understanding of how we elect our president is huge, because there are many people that are my age, younger or older, that, really don't understand how the Electoral College works or know why we have it in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose here it's the opposite really, because a lot of people just look at the actual, just the name Democrat. Like here, you say, "Oh, I'm going to vote for Democrat or Republican," but you've got the Electoral College, and you kind of look at it locally. Is that right? Like, as in within the state, or because
so it's basically 50 state elections. Each state runs their own election, and that's how. And all 48 out of 50 states use a winner take all method, and we talk about this in the film.
Yeah.
But that winner take all method and the math associated with electoral college creates a system by which we can elect a runner-up president. A runner-up president candidate can ascend to the presidency, even though they've got less votes. And that creates tension in a quote unquote democracy, where the core concept of democracy is majority rules.
Yeah, that's interesting. I suppose the only thing we have close to that is where we have council elections, but that doesn't give us we call it prime minister here. We don't have a president really. The European Union does, but they're not voted in. It's not democratic really either, that system. But that's the whole thing about Brexit. And anyway, we're going to detract and go into another realm of politics here. However,
I'm not an expert on Brexit. So,
No, don't worry. I was also in the Philippines for that, but I did try and vote from there but anyway, I don't want to go into that. But the council elections is where the whole of England and Wales and Scotland and Ireland, the UK, in other words, have separate counties. So they are run, democratically, having their own laws or whatever for each. And then basically that they're called council elections. So London's one, Birmingham, Manchester, they're the big cities. They have their kind of own mayors. But out of all that, we don't have the Prime Minister voted. So that's a separate thing to the general election. And then with that, they don't really, although you have something called a constituent where you vote for your local MP, they tend to listen, what's the Prime Minister actually going to do for the whole country? Rather than this is a state vote or a council in the analogy I'm using for the UK, they don't look at that locally, you see, as a local kind of state election thing. Whereas I think in the electoral college system, they look at it locally, don't they, as a state vote, do they? Or
the way it works is that states have the sole authority to decide how that state allocates its electoral votes. So you have 40 out of 50 states that choose the winner take all method, meaning that whoever the popular vote winner is in that state gets all of that state's electoral votes. You've got Maine and Nebraska, who are the two outliers that do it differently. They split up their votes by congressional district.
Yeah. Or I suppose if you look at it in the European Union way, if Britain was in the European Union, France has a proportional representation system. So nearly whoever got X amount of votes all still managed to stay and you could get a minister from a different party because it's proportional to how people voted, which is scary because they get a very far right party again, almost getting in. But anyway, let's not go into that. But and then you got different countries like Germany who'll be the total opposite to that, and things like that, So, but actually, not now. Actually, they've got an issue with far right as well. But we're getting too political here, and we really want to stick it with the film. Let's find out when this film is coming out, or hopefully this podcast will be released when it's come out. So how people can actually screen it then, get to watch it. I'm in the UK. It's a global podcast. However, 2/3 of my listeners are from the US, but it doesn't mean that people from all over the world wouldn't take any interest in the film and want to listen to it from wherever they have their favorite podcast app.
You can download the PBS app on your laptop, your phone, your smart TV, and you can watch One Person, One Vote starting on September 30th.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I also believe it'll be on the PBS YouTube channel for 90 days, but I do recommend downloading the PBS app. There's a lot of really great content on there that, one thing that's really great about PBS is that they're not beholden to, what most streamers and most content providers are beholden to, just in terms of clickbaity type content. They can actually really program content that you won't see in other places because their focus is creating content that serves people, the American people at large. And so there's so much great content on PBS, and it's the people's station. It's a public broadcasting station. Our tax dollars pay for it, and it's a great resource for us. And so definitely huge plug for the PBS Smart app.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure I try and download it. I was hoping I could have a screening of it actually, but I normally watch these films before, but we'll take a look at it.
Sorry about that. We could have organized.
No worries, because it would have given me a little bit more specific. But luckily, I did, have an interest in politics, as I've mentioned at the beginning of the show. Right, yeah. Yeah. So.
What do most Brits feel about the Electoral College? I mean, what's the perception? I'd love to.
Yeah, they don't really talk about the Electoral College system much unless they know about politics. And even then, what you've discussed, they don't know that deep into it, and they certainly don't know about the beginnings of it. In 1748. So is it 48? You said, or
1787.
1787. Yeah. So they just probably would hear about the Electoral College as the American votes are going on in November. And then they'll hear about it. And the ones who don't have much of an idea about politics anyway or an interest in it. It'll just be a name that will just go over their head, whereas the ones that do have an interest will say, the Electoral College system, and maybe not even know about the mechanics of it as you've explained. So that's quite interesting. So
that's not too different from us here in the States. Hopefully one person, one vote will change that.
Hopefully, yeah. Let's get this podcast out there and get it all widely publicized. That's what I say. I'd love to have in the show again for various different reasons, and you're also a filmmaker, so you've done other documentaries. I've seen you've won awards before, so I'm sure there'll be other things in the pipeline. What is coming up for you before we go?
I mean, I've had smaller roles on other projects. This is my directorial. But yes, I've been blessed to work on other projects in a smaller capacity that have had great impact, I feel.
And why
Mama Bears, which you can also, is also another independent lens film.
Okay.
Last year. Yeah.
Mama Bears.
Mama Bears. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, have you got a background in politics yourself, or did you just? I mean, I know a lot of people. You don't have to have a background in politics to talk about what you're talking about, anyway. But
my background in politics is I'm a voter.
Yeah. Well, that's a powerful place to be, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm an engaged citizen, and I saw this pain point that is shared by many Americans, is that we don't understand how we elect the president, the process by which we elect the president. And I felt that I was uniquely positioned to make a film that could be representative of America, not just, one mindset. My film is nonpartisan. We feature 4 electors, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, 1 Green Party elector, and 1 Kanye West elector. So it's the full gamut of all the delights that America has to offer in our political.
It's gone back to rapping now, by the way. I've heard him on a few collaborations recently, but
there were actually electors for Kanye West on the ballot on many states, and
recently this year.
Not this year.
2020. 2020.
And there were about over 6,000 people that voted for Kanye in Colorado. Which is
wow.
Over 6,000 people that actually.
Which was where he was
for Kanye West, even though he couldn't mathematically win the Electoral College because he wasn't on the ballot on enough states to do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're running out of time a little bit, but as I said, I'd love to have you back on the show. We could discuss many things, or at least have a catch up about one person, one vote, and push the agenda forward more into getting them into schools and things like that. But in the meantime, really great pleasure having you on this show, Maximina.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And do come back again. And once again, thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.
That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening. And remember, if you want to support what we do, then share, subscribe, and leave a review over on Apple Podcasts. Or head over to my website, davepalmer.com, and click on Rate Show. Well, that's all for now, but I'll see you in the next episode of The Dave Palmer Show.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.